Okay, everyone, welcome to this webinar, EOSC EDEN webinar. As you can see from this slide here, the topic for this webinar is user perspectives on long-term data preservation, reducing pain points for researchers, repositories, and archives. I'll be chairing this webinar, and together with my colleague Helena Andreasen and Giacomo Canizzaro, we will be presenting and also guiding you through this webinar. First, a little bit practical information, some housekeeping. So this webinar is being recorded until the Q&A session, and the recording will be available on the EOSC EDEN YouTube channel, with links also to related resources. Please use the Q&A panel to submit your questions and comments during the presentations, and they will be addressed in the panel or in the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So this is the agenda for our webinar today. Now at part one, welcoming and introducing the webinar and the EOSC EDEN project. Then Helena will take over and no, sorry, I will actually ask you some questions about you. And then we have a third section about, or the second main section about discipline requirements and needs by Helena. And then Giacomo will be telling us about user journey maps. And then at the end, we will have a Q&A session before we wrap up the webinar. So the goal and focus of today's webinar, so we will present you some results from our ongoing work in EOSC EDEN on identification of requirements and needs for long-term data preservation within and across scientific disciplines and data types. And our main focus will be on user perspectives and what strategies and tools we have been and will be using to identify user needs and also to reduce pain points for researchers, repositories, and archives. So at this phase, we will still be working on what in this pyramid of motivational factors on driving forces behind changes of research culture is depicted in the bottom, like it's to make things possible and to make things easy for users. Briefly about the EOSC EDEN project, it's a Horizon Europe framework program project that aims to support and promote digital preservation practices and standards at European and national levels. And to do that, we will develop user-centric tools, services, and standards. We have several objectives. The first one is to establish a framework and practices to support the creation of curation, digital preservation, and access strategies in Europe. Number two is to enrich EOSC with tools to kind of implement these strategies. And number three is to increase adoption of curation, digital preservation, and access practices within different scientific disciplines and also across them and also for different data types. And then the fourth objective is to boost data curation and quality in Europe. And closely related to number four is objective number 5, which is to identify and consolidate a network of repositories and archives for digital preservation within the EOSC, the European Open Science Cloud, in collaboration with our sister project, the Fidelis project. So this is how we have organized the EOSC EDEN project. We have 5 work packages. I'll focus here on the first 3 ones. Work package 1 is responsible to establish a framework and model for digital preservation. Work package 2, very briefly, is responsible for establishing and enhancing tools and services. And work package 3, which is the main focus of this webinar, is about discipline-specific requirements, validation, and future use. So here a little bit more about work package 3. Basically, it links the project to discipline and data type specific needs and requirements. And we are now iteratively providing discipline specific and cross-disciplinary as well as data specific requirements for digital preservation and data quality to work package 1 and 2 respectively. And we are also now soon starting validating and enhancing the new digital preservation framework from work package 2 and the tools and services from work package framework from work package 1 and the digital tools and services from work package 2 via pilot testing. And then in a last phase, we will also create a support kit that will empower disciplines to adopt, and if needed, adapt the outcomes from the EOSC EDEN project. So this is our consortium with several organizations across Europe, and the project is led by CSC in Finland. And on this slide, just briefly to mention that these project partner institutions, they represent several disciplines, and we have picked 7 early adopter disciplines, and they will provide expertise in defining requirements and needs. And they are also involved in pilot testing and validating the framework and the tools. And they will also maybe in the later phase of the project and of the project adopt and adapt project outcomes, and of course contribute to the support kit. So we have, as I said, 7 early adopter disciplines. That is climate simulations, earth and environmental sciences, food sciences, high energy physics, life sciences and bioinformatics, linguistics, and social sciences. And before we start on the second part with Helene, we would like to learn a little bit more about you, the audience, that will help us to improve future webinars. So please go to this short poll either during or after the webinar. You see here the URL and the QR code. It's only 2 questions about your background, discipline, and what kind of research infrastructure you are involved in. And Helena has just posted the link also in the chat. Yes, okay, with that, I'll hand over to Helena.
Okay, I hope you see my screen. As Philip mentioned, one of the tasks in our work package is to iteratively provide discipline-specific and cross-disciplinary, as well as data type-specific requirements for digital preservation and data quality to work package 1 and 2. And in order to do this, we will employ 3 different methods. That is desk-based mappings, interviews, and survey questions. And the analysis that we do will address the entire data stewardship lifecycle. In the first year of the project, we have primarily focused on the 7 early adopter disciplines, but in the next phases and also after the project, the goal is that what we do will also be useful to other disciplines as well. So a few words about how we have proceeded in our data collection. So the first methods that we employed was the desk-based mapping, trying to identify existing requirements or practices, and also to identify any gaps out there and needs. And the way we did it was to go to different repositories and other types of discipline-specific communities, and we examined different types of online documentation that we considered relevant for long-term preservation and data quality. That could be policy documents, strategy documents, online protocols, other types of formally published documents. So we had a wide range of documents that we identified and that we continued working on. More about that later. The second type of data collection that we did last year was to conduct a set of interviews. And the goal with the interviews was to complement the desk-based mapping in a way. And by the interviews, we wanted to collect user stories and any community norms and expectations. And we targeted both repository managers and researchers because we thought that it would be important to have both voices present in a project like this. And we created 2 different sets of questions, one for each of the 2 different stakeholder groups, questions that thematically were thematically structured around the data lifecycle. And so we had all these data that we were planning to collect, and in order to be able to categorize them, to combine them, and allow other tasks and work packages to reuse them, we decided to structure the data and the data collection around the reuse fitness model, which is a core component of the EOSC EDEN project. This is supposed to serve as a frame for assessing aspects that are important for the evaluation of a repository's strategies for identification, selection, and reappraisal of digital objects for long-term digital preservation. It's composed of 3 pillars: contextual data quality, technical data quality, metadata quality, so things that can be derived from the object itself. And these will need to be described against 2 other aspects that are the capabilities that archives have to meet these qualities, and also the preservation objectives and the community needs. And to go a little bit into detail, what we did was to, per entry, so per document and per interviewee, we categorized the data. So as you can see here, so you have the desk-based mapping spreadsheet and then the interview spreadsheet, where then each document and interviewee, the data were categorized. And to give one example, for high energy physics, we had 7 entries in the desk-based mapping, and we had 4 interviewees. So quite a lot of data to work on for that discipline. Then in the next step, we synthesized the data, so per component and per discipline. So again, we kept the 2 data collections apart. So we had one spreadsheet per, for the desk-based mapping and the interviews. But so for instance, for high energy physics, we had 1 line in the spreadsheet, and then we had the 5 different components. So we had 1 column for where we identify requirements and existing practices in high energy physics, and then a neighboring column where we identified knowledge gaps and needs for that given component. And then in a third step, we summarized each of the 5 components across the disciplines, because one of the goals was to identify the commonalities and specificities in what was already existing, but also to identify any emerging needs. And all these summaries and links to data can be found in a report that we published on Zenodo last year. And the link you can find in the references in these slides. So I will not go into all the details of the data, but I can say that what we saw when working on the data collection was that we are confronted with a very heterogeneous information landscape. When looking at the different repositories that are out there, we have on the one side, the very well established, very mature repositories where you have clear standalone documents, wikis that adhere to already established standards, where perhaps you have data scientists, experts available, developers, digital preservationists that can support and inform and advise on a large set of aspects. All the way to the other end, where you have smaller repositories that operate on a reduced scale for one reason or another. These are often dependent on other units, for instance, for IT and archival services. We see a very uneven presence of services and implementation of standards. These are often not, I will try not to we will not generalize in any way, but we do see that many smaller repositories are scholar-led, so which means that often they are in close connection with the research community, which is really good when it comes to communicating with the research community. But there might be, in some cases, reduced capacity for development inside the repository. And I want to underline that even if these smaller repositories do not excel on all levels. They may still excel on specific areas that are crucial for the type of data that they work with on a regular basis. And that can be discipline-specific metadata or, for instance, GDPR compliance. So we have chosen in the first year a wide approach in order to capture as diverse practices or requirements and needs as possible. Of course, this approach has put some limits on the extent of representativity and the level of detail because we cannot at this stage report the complete diversity of the existing requirements and needs and gaps that exist within a discipline. But we think that the data offer a very broad starting point that can be built on in other tasks and phases of the EOSC EDEN project and also beyond. So just to give a few highlights from the data, when looking at the different components, we see some common requirements appearing across the board. So for instance, we see that data provenance information and contextual metadata are important for data reuse. We see that there is a common preference for open and standardized file formats, very common use of persistent identifiers, clear deposit criteria, that stipulate that data must be discipline and format specific. And also we see a general use of specialized curators, but within this group, we do see varying levels of long-term preservation expertise. We also see in the data some specific requirements, some specific practices, and these are often connected to the type of data that the repositories work with. For instance, in linguistics, for repositories that work with linguistic data, we see that consent forms, consent mechanisms are a very important feature. We see the importance of having multiple access levels and licenses to protect sensitive data, and also, for instance, ethical or legal frameworks to preserve this kind of data. And just to mention it, to a large extent, these that I mentioned are also relevant for the social sciences, because here we are more talking about data type specific requirements instead of discipline-specific requirements. We also see some emerging needs across the board. For instance, the importance of having robust data documentation to support preservation and data utility, that there is an effective management of file formats to ensure preservation, accessibility, and interoperability. There is a need for a better understanding among researchers when it comes to metadata standards, and also that they adhere to these, and also that metadata standards are interoperable across disciplines. There is a need for standard, comprehensive, and mandatory policies of different types, and also strategies for long-term preservation and reappraisal. So I will not spend more time on the data at this point. I will just say that now that we are in the next year, well, in year 2 of our work, we will do more fine-tune and narrow data collections in close collaboration with the other work packages in EOSC EDEN. But before I give the floor to Giacomo, where we're going to talk about how to systematize, visualize, and contextualize user needs and pain points, I would like us to warm up a little bit. We are in a webinar, but we still would like you to work a little bit. So by joining our Slido and by working with these 2 next questions, we hope that you will start enhancing your own knowledge about how to identify discipline and data type specific needs. So my first Slido question is, and I hope you can join the Slido by either scanning the QR code or tapping the code. This is primarily to the support staff that is present in our webinar. So could you think about a few words that you want to share about how you engage with your user community, how you engage with them in order to identify their changing needs for long-term preservation over time? I hope this work, and I will give you, yeah, I see question answers coming in. So I will give you a minute to work on this. And Philip has also put the code in the chat. See many good ideas coming in here. This is very good. I hope you can find a way of sharing these results afterwards so that you all can get access to these good ideas. Because one of the things is that we want you, by this webinar to perhaps bring some good ideas home and well, start thinking about it in your own practice. Okay, so I will give you another 30 minutes. No, not 30 minutes, 30 seconds. And as you can see here on the top of the Slido, it's already has started to summarize the data that come in. So we have meetings, we have trainings, we have surveys. Yeah. Good. Okay, so thank you so much. We will now turn to our second question. And if some of you didn't have time to put everything in there, you're free to put it in the put it in share them with us afterwards in one way or another. Let's go to our next question, and this goes to everyone. So after deposit, so after data have been deposited to the repository, how long should the type of data that you typically work with be kept available? So this could be, so do the data that come in, is there any reason that perhaps should be kept forever? Could they be replaced at some point, at some time? There are many reasons as to why data should be kept for long or could be replaced. So it's interesting to see what the practices are at your place. And yeah, and if you have some comments to the final question, if they could be replaced or reproduced, that would also be good. Uh, so you still have about 40 seconds. Um, and again, very glad to see so many comments coming in. This is very useful to get info from that many people. Very, very useful. Thank you. Okay, so I think we will continue, but I think that both questions are still, both polls are still open. So I think you should be able to continue writing even when I switch slides. Okay, so actually, Giacomo, it's now I would like to give the floor to you. So I will stop sharing.
Okay, hello everyone. I am Giacomo Cannizzaro, working from SURF in the Netherlands, and I will take over from Helene and continue bringing you on the journey of our first year of our Package 3 activity. So I am the task leader for task 3.2, and we are taking care in my task of the pilot methodology and validation. So basically, to put it very easily, Eden has the objective of actually creating outputs, both in terms of frameworks and metrics, let's say a bit more the theoretical side of it from Work Package 1. I hope I'm not going to receive an angry email from Work Package 1 participants for calling them theoretical, and a bit more operational outputs from Work Package 2, which are actually tools and a registry of these tools to help and enhance the digital preservation landscape. So we indeed have to test things, and the things are more specifically, we're package one, the things we're going to test are a series of metrics, which will allow us to have a more precise understanding on how to appraise a digital object for preservation along different metrics, and also a framework for reappraisal. So this is actually the second question from Helene helps us, because as you've seen, there is quite a varied understanding of what long-term means. And when you're preserving something long-term, then at a certain point, maybe you want to have points of reappraisal for the object that you're preserving to understand if this is still valuable to be preserved. And our package 2 instead will enrich the EOSC landscape with tools, automated tools like API connectors and a series of just services that will allow users to better perform their LTP needs, and also a registry that contains both these newly developed tools, but also tools that already exist, and a series of services like digital archives to make them easier to find. Another output of the project that is important for our task, but it's not necessarily part of the things that we will pilot, is the output of the third task over package 3, which is creating a support kit to guide the users in the adoption of the other two outputs. And this is important for us because we're not going to test this, but doing pilots that are especially are discipline specific will allow us to inform what and how to focus this support kit to better help the end users. As I said, we are going to do these pilots from a discipline-specific point of view. So in task 3.2, we have a representative of all the 7 early adopter disciplines that Philip already mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. And the representative of these disciplines will will be the one performing the testing and the validation of the outputs from Work Package 1 and Work Package 2. To do this, we need 2 main assets. One is the actual methodology that we're going to follow, which was a deliverable that we finished at the end of the last year, so in December 25. And these user journey maps, which was a milestone that we published, we achieved, not published yet, in October. And it will be part of the supporting material that will allow us to contextualize the pilots. But first, let's start with the pilot methodology itself. I'm going to go through this diagram that represents how we imagined and designed our methodology. So this methodology, the pilots will be triggered every time a work package, either 1 or 2, has a release, which means they publish their outputs, the metrics, a certain sets of tools. And this release will be composed by their outputs itself, but also a series of supporting assets, for example, documentations, right, or use cases that will allow us to understand how to use the tool and contextualize it. This testing package, let's say, is going to be handed off to our task 3.2, and we will add to the testing package supporting materials, maybe discipline-specific use cases or test data sets that needs to be tailored to the specific discipline that will test the tool, and the user journey maps, which I will talk a bit more in detail later. Then we hand off this to the actual disciplinary testing teams. They will perform the testing, evaluating the tool according to a series of feedback principles that we described, for example, completeness of the documentation, ease of use, so these general feedback principles, but also especially we will evaluate these outputs, the release, against more strict acceptance criteria. So we want to evaluate the fitness of purpose of a tool, for example. Is the tool doing what is designed for? Then, after the testing is done, we take that feedback from the testing teams, we package it and kind of like make it nice for our developing work package 1 or 2, and then we give it back to the work package so that they can incorporate in their work and then go in their next stage of development of their outputs. Finally, we also want to have a feedback loop over the methodology, because of course, we're going to have pilots over the course of the next 2 years, where package 2 will release the same services at different technology readiness level. Also, work package 1. So work package 1, we have 2 different releases. So we want to improve our methodology the more we do pilots. But also getting back feedback, both internally and from the other work packages, will allow us to enrich and plan better the support kit that I mentioned before. But then a very interesting and important asset for these pilot methodologies are these user journey maps. The user journey maps are something that we borrowed from the commercial world, and they are a tool that it's a visualization, it's a diagram basically, that allow you to understand in a visual way the process that a user, an actor, goes through to accomplish a specific goal. What do we do to create a user journey maps is that we create a general goal. We divide it in single steps. So we apply, let's say, the scientific method to this goal. And for each step, we want to record the goal of the step and the actions that the user need to take to achieve that goal. But more importantly, on top of the actions and the goals, we also want to clearly represent the touch points. So for each goal, you're going to interact with a service or a framework, a policy. You're going to interact with something external. And while interacting with these tools, let's say, you're going to experience certain emotions. And we want to record especially the negative emotions. These are quite important. We call them the pain points. These are quite important because they allow us to clearly understand where we need to act in this user journey. And if we develop something that needs to address that pain point, then the acceptance criteria, that fitness for purpose, it's easy to evaluate because we're going to be able to say, is this tool actually addressing a pain point? How does this journey map changes after we introduce this enhanced tool or a better framework or a better policy? So of course, we want to consider all the outputs that the EDEN will develop. And so we created 2 different user journey maps. User journey map number 1, which concern all the actions around the ingest and appraisal of a data set. So from the awareness, like why do I have to preserve these data sets, to the evaluation if the data set is worth to be preserved, to the actual deposit. And of course, also to the ability to access the data set in a public way and to reuse it. This has been done twice, because on one user journey maps, we recorded all the actions that are taken from the repository staff. So when a user wants to upload data to my repository, what do I need to do? And on the other end, we wanted to record the actions that are taken by the end user. So a researcher that wants to upload a data set, or even just a researcher that wants to browse around and find a public data set to perform their study. Secondly, we created this second user journey maps, which is about reappraisal and eventual deaccession. This was a bit more interesting because while the first user journey maps represent actions that are taken almost daily, I would say, from anyone working in the digital preservation landscape, in this case, we're talking about something that is a bit more wishful. I also saw a bit from the answers from the previous question that Helene put in the chat, that that there's a lot of people that claim that reappraisal should be done, but what we saw in creating these user journey maps is that it's something that it is not yet very common to perform. So this user journey map represents, rather than something that we see done, something that we think how it should go forward, this work. So in this case, we cover all the steps that goes from the actual definition of a policy from a digital archive. In this case, the user journey maps is only concerned with the action taken by the staff of a repository, because they're going to take care of the reappraisal process. to the selection of the candidate. So if you have all the data sets stored in your repository, which data sets you need to reappraise, to a decision. So either a change in the archival, like putting in just in an archive without making it forward facing, or actually deaccessing the data set because it's obsoleted for any reason. And then even to a point of review of your policy that you established. How did we do it operationally? Well, we started with creating a general user journey map. So how do we see the steps of ingest and appraisal from a general point of view? And then we asked our disciplinary experts that represent the members of our task to characterize these user journey maps from a discipline-specific point of view. And to do so, we sourced a series of material that is, of course, user guides and policies from different digital archives, but also all the data from the deliverable 3.1, all the work that task 3.1 that Helene described. Because of course, not only we actually sourced the actual data, but the people that were participating in task 3.2 and creating these user journey maps are also the people that worked on the data collection for our previous deliverables. So they really sourced the expertise on the requirements and on the landscape of digital preservation. Now, what I would like to do is to go forward to do a bit of exercise, I hope together, even if it's going to be mostly me talking, to go through the user journey map number 1 from the end user point of view rather than the repository staff. What we did is we separated this idea of, okay, I want to preserve my data sets. And the steps is we start with the awareness and motivation. So why do I want to preserve these data sets? Then the appraisal, so is the data set worth too valuable to preserve? Then the preparation of the data set, the deposit of the data set in the digital archive, and then the availability of the data set to be accessed and downloaded and ultimately reused. So we start with the awareness, and of course we want to understand why, let's say, you want to preserve these data sets. So you will probably need to confront yourself with all the policies. They may be institutional, they may be from your funder, from your publisher, and also start fishing around, shopping around for a service that fits your requirements. It could be, how long it preserves or other policies. This will, of course, will depend on your requirements. So we will touch policies, which means policies from your funder again, or your institutions, also the best practices of your field, and you want to maybe interact with a registry that will guide you through a selection of available and suitable services. What could be some frustration that you experience in this case? Well, the policies may be unclear or not defined enough, so you are in an edge case and it's difficult to understand where to go. So the guidance, you don't feel very guided, maybe by the data stewards in your university. Or if you are instead, all the requirements are clear, but then when you try to shop around for a service, it's very difficult to understand where and how to find it. Then we are in the appraisal step. So is this data set valuable for long-term preservation? You want to evaluate the data set. These are the actions you have to take. You want to check the integrity of your file. Are your metadata complete? Of course, if you want to preserve an object for reuse, depending on, again, the requirements of that you need to follow for this upload, you maybe need to understand if your metadata is complete. Is this object reusable, or you're just archiving data for the sake of archiving it, which is still valid, of course. Then you want to evaluate the value versus the cost. So, for example, do you want to upload only the raw data or also the processed data? What is the purpose? You have to evaluate all these things. You're going to use maybe some tools that allow you to check the integrity of your files. You want to check if you are compliant with established metadata schemas, either from your field or from the repository you chose. And of course, just you will have to adhere to a certain framework along which you evaluate these data sets. Of course, again, one of the main pain points in this case is lack of guidance, because you don't know very well how to evaluate and what are the specific points of evaluation. And that is the main frustration that you probably will experience. Then you have to prepare your data set. So you want to prepare the data and your metadata for upload. You have to check the file formats. If they are non-proprietary, for example, probably a repository will want you to upload data in an open source format. You want to prepare the data set. If you need anonymization of the data, for example, or other operations before you make the data public, you want to start understanding what license do you use? What if you have an embargo? If you have to choose how to make this data public. And so, of course, you want to, again, interact with tools that will validate your data set, either for the metadata or the data set itself. You want to follow the guidelines of the repository and your institution in terms of license and what you need to upload. And maybe you would like for someone to explain what licenses are there, because you're probably an expert in a specific field and not on licensing. Again, this may be what are the pain points that you may experience. It's probably a manual and laborious process. They're very prone to human error. Like filling metadata can be complicated, especially if the metadata schema maybe is not something you're used to, or it's particularly long. Maybe you have an edge case in which like a standard set of licenses or creating common licenses are not easy to apply, and you would like counsel from maybe a person expert in the legal field to understand your case. Finally, okay, you solved all these issues and you are finally at the point of depositing this dataset in a digital archive. And so the goal is to upload the dataset with all the full information from the provenance to the actual metadata that you have. To do this, you want to upload the data. The system is probably gonna perform a checksum or some other file integrity checks. The metadata should be completed, and you have to select the license. To do this, you're going to interact mainly with the repository app, which could be an API or a graphical interface, and all the tools that are included in this process. Again, probably you will have to fill other manual metadata, manually some other metadata. You will have to look around on all your folders and all your RDM tools to understand the provenance of the dataset and to try to create the best reproduction package in this upload possible. Again, the license could be something that frustrates you because it's difficult to find, depending also on which sometimes the pain point and the touch points can cover multiple steps, depending also on which service you are interacting with. Maybe there is a lack of automation, right? Or the connection is bad. Basically, maybe the repository app is just clunky and it's difficult to use and not clear. But you finally made it, and now you are just a researcher that want to access this data set on the repository, either yourself in 10 years because you want to reproduce your results, or maybe let's pretend you're just a new PhD student that is shopping around for a new shiny data set to perform the research. You want to access a public data set, so you want to look for and find the data set and download it and reuse it. To do this, you probably interact with certain discovery services, for example, a PID graph or a research graph that connects all the metadata together and allow you to have this large understanding of the data sets available in your field. And then again, you interact with the repository app. What are possible frustrations in doing so? Maybe the data set is not findable, right? It's missing a PID, or the PID link is broken, there is no tombstoning, or maybe it's not easy to download, or maybe some access issue because you're from a country that doesn't have access to a specific repository, or there's going to be an embargo that was not well organized, or maybe it was supposed to expire, but it didn't. The metadata is not complete, so it's difficult to reuse because you don't know what tools were used to analyze this data set. Maybe you only have process data, etc., etc. So now we go a bit on the usefulness of the user journey maps. If you see here, there are points of all these pain points that we could address with the outputs of EDEN. So we want clearer policies. That's something we can do with the support kit. Or we, at the awareness and at the beginning of the stage, when we were looking for a service, we do not have a place that shows us all the possible available digital archives that we could use. So having a registry that we're going to develop that connects and allows you to filter according to specific filtering items, it will really help you. Or then you want to appraise, right? You want to say, okay, is this data set valuable? Or package one is developing metrics that will allow you to have more clear evaluation point for your data set. And the test kit will offer you guidance in something that may be not so straightforward for you. Also, in all these other steps, when you start interacting with the repository service, you will see that sometimes maybe the frustration come as inability to use a specific tool or having to do things manually. So creating creating or enhancing of tools that are available from our package 2 that will allow for a better automation of these processes will directly impact. So when we are testing all these outputs, when we're evaluating them, if we refer back to a user journey map, we can quickly say, is this tool actually relieving a pain point, and how well? So it really gives us a direct idea of the usefulness of a tool in this visual and very contextual diagram. I wanted to, now I have to switch back to Helene because Slido is down, so we cannot integrate it with Google Slides, but I would like Helene to share the screen with the Slido, and I would like to finish my part of the presentation with this question. So what is, now that you're perfectly mapped into our first user journey maps of ingest and appraisal, what would be your biggest pain point that you would experience in this process, or you have experienced? Maybe you actually are a person that ingests data on a daily basis, and I would like to know your point of view. Thank you, Helene. Value for LTP. Indeed, standardization is quite important. See. License selector, yes, this is definitely something that we encountered also in our discipline and data type specific characterization of the user journey maps, that it may complicated to find the right licenses, because sometimes, especially for smaller disciplines or disciplines that are a bit less data mature, it's difficult to rely on existing best practices. The researchers do not wish to deposit data. Yes, indeed, showing also the value of long-term preservation by itself is difficult. And in my experience as a researcher in my past life, I also think people tend to do this at the end, and then it's difficult to go back and find the provenance data. The ownership is not clear. Who needs to deposit the data set? Clear who covers the cost. Chaotic national rules around GDPR. Yes, these are a lot of things that we should improve in our support kit. And this is all super interesting. Thank you. Okay, I would say let's give each other another 30 seconds, 1 minute, and then we can switch back to our Q&A. I think this is all very interesting, and some of these we found while compiling these user journey maps. Some of that I will definitely steal for our iterative work. Okay. Participants are typing. I have this easy countdown at the top of the screen, and I will follow that. Yes, I agree. It's a bit difficult to inform the researchers of the value of this, and especially when they do it at the end, it's difficult to source everything back. I think I already said this. Yeah, agree. Yes, I think in Eden, we really see the value of trying to automate a lot of these processes, metadata extraction, metadata conversion to standardized schemas, provenance, like trying to really have just the data set can speak for itself. It really could be valuable. Okay, we're almost at 10 minutes to the end, so I would think it's time to go to our Q&A section. Thank you everyone for these insightful pain points. I'm not going to promise we're going to be able to address them, but thank you for sharing your frustration. And I give the floor to Philip for our Q&A section.
Yes, so before we stop recording, I would like to thank Helena and Giacomo, our speakers. I forgot to mention our roles in EOSC EDEN. I'm the work package leader, and then Helena and Giacomo are the leaders of 2 of the tasks in work package 3. And also thank you to you, the audience, for attending so far. I hope you still will be with us in the Q&A, and also for your interactions. And please, it would be good if we could encourage you to keep up to date on EOSC EDEN. You can do that through several channels that you see here on the right-hand side on our slide. Yeah, and just a reminder to fill in these 2 short questions. Maybe someone can repost it in the chat, the link. And then I think we are ready for Q&A. I can stop the recording.